Is it becoming overwhelming to keep up with all the new media channels, all the new social media platforms, all the new places you can promote your business? Is it becoming difficult to keep track of the listings on each site, especially when it comes to podcasts, content networks, and other ways to drive organic traffic to a website? Hey, I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. I'm looking at offering a white label solution for the many copywriters and marketers who are on this particular newsletter, Ad Briefing's Copywriting Tips. And the reason why is because if you're focusing on writing copy, very often moving from a freelance copywriter to an agency, you don't have the time or inclination to manage a staff that is now doing technical work. Now, let me explain. This morning, I'm going through and I'm loading my podcasts or claiming my podcasts on the Spotify network because Spotify has offered some solutions. They bought out Anchor.fm and they're offering some solutions for podcasters that gives me access to demographics on the platform. It gives me access to listener streams, different kinds of starts. Like, for example, I can see how many people started listening to a podcast versus how many finished. Now, I get some of that data in my podcast hosting, but the demographics are extremely valuable. I can see if I'm on target. And something I discovered is that on Spotify, there are much more affluent users than on other channels. So Apple and Spotify tend to have more affluent listeners for my particular channels than Google, for example, or YouTube, for example. I almost get no views on YouTube, but that makes sense because it's an audio podcast in a video platform. So what I'm doing is I'm claiming my podcast, but also YouTube is promoting podcasts. So if you have video podcasts on YouTube, they'll send you a lot of traffic, just like shorts. And so if you have a 15-minute podcast and it's video podcast, it needs to be tagged the right way. It needs to be claimed the right way on YouTube. And you can literally start feeding YouTube your videos. But if it was an audio podcast to begin with, I need to assign a contractor who's going to then put in some stock footage and make the podcast interesting from a visual perspective for the YouTube channel. Then to extract key little tidbits to make some shorts to promote the podcast on the channel so that we can reach the maximum audience. Now, will you see me doing this for myself? No, because it's a highly in demand service and I much rather do it for clients who are paying me to do it than drudging through all the difficult things that are a big problem today. However, if I add a few more staff people, it will be less frustrating. And there are technical people who enjoy doing this kind of thing. So what I want to talk about here, whether you're going to offer this service to your clients of basically making sure that their podcasts, their video marketing, their content is best syndicated, and maybe we should define what it means by syndication, uh, or you're going to hire my company to white label it for you, meaning my team will do it and your team will get all the, well, you particularly will get all the credit. But here's how it works. First off, syndication is where I publish a podcast one time and it goes up onto different channels. So this podcast, Ad Briefings Copywriting Tips, you can listen to it on Spotify. You can listen to it on Apple Podcasts. You can listen to it on Google Play. You can listen to it on more than 100 platforms. And I didn't go to each platform and basically set this up. I used a publishing service that will send my RSS feed. An RSS feed is a list of my podcasts in chronological order, and it will syndicate those all the way out to all these other channels so that you can listen to this podcast on the channel that is best for you. Now, I've already wrote the script for the podcast. I've recorded the podcast. I've edited the descriptions and the headlines. I've done the keyword research. That is a copywriting function that you may well enjoy much better than the technical function of making sure all the other stuff stays running. Now, the descriptions and things like that, making sure they're keyword laden. Once they go out on these different channels, they behave differently on different channels. So keywords that work really well in descriptions, title descriptions that work really well in one channel may not work at all in another channel because again, there are different listeners on each platforms. So when you go to talk with your customer, it's very important they understand that yes, they're publishing a podcast, but that's only the start. When you sit down with a customer, I'm working with a client right now. We're going through the customer avatar. We're going through their key product offerings using the matrix that we talk about, the primary and secondary offering, upsell, downsell type concepts. We're going through what are their sales landing pages? What is the informational content that drives the landing page? What kind of medium are they going to promote? So, are they going to take their long form sales letter, turn it into lead generation pieces, back it by 3 to 5 different informational or decision making aiding content to drive back to the sales letter and then ultimately make a sale? And then from that, are they going to create social media posts to promote each of the internal informational pages and each of the decision making helping pages? And see, it's more complex than most people understand. Now, unfortunately, you and I get frustrated because we try to explain it to a client, and it takes so much time to explain it to the client, time that we could have just went and found a client that already understands all this stuff and is very happy to pay a team to take care of it for them. But that's just the copywriting and marketing side. Do you understand where I'm coming from here? So if you're a solopreneur, if you're a freelance marketer, if you've got just the writing side taken care of, very often you'll have technical people out there who think they know what they're doing when it comes to the writing side because they're already doing the integration side, and then neither thing gets done well. So I focus on the content and reaching highly qualified customers. I have people who help. Now I do some of it because this today I just got this announcement. It's now picking up traffic. I was able to verify it's worth going after in my stats, but I do the first two, and then my team takes care of the rest. Now the reason why I have technical people involved, because one of the things that we want to do is we want to know. So for my Spotify claims on my ad briefings copywriting tips newsletter, I need to know what categories I put it in. I need to know that it's pulling the right RSS feed. I need to know that once it's up, that when I go into demographics and audience, that there's some information there. So for example, just on Spotify alone, for this podcast that has 169 episodes, and those are just the episodes that are in the podcasting channel. Because remember, there's a bunch of YouTube videos that are posted. There's content on my website. And then before I went to this platform, there's a whole lot more content. I got more backlog content than I have actually published. And that's, again, why I want to build up a technical team to go get that content online. I already did all the writing. I don't need to write new writing. They can get the stuff online. But this podcast on just Spotify has 809 streams. Now I knew that because a lot of these stats are syndicated back to they drive back to my main publishing platform, but that is 336 listeners. So there's a metric here. If there's 336 unique visitors or unique listeners listening to 809 streams, then there is a ratio there that we can look at. They're listening to more than one audio. But there was 1,136 starts. Now this is the last, I think, last 7 days. This is the last 7 days of this podcast. I now have some interesting information here that I can use to write better content, to create better podcasts, to create more value for my audience, and compare it with my referral stats from the Spotify platform to see if any of these people are actually becoming leads or if they're actually becoming customers. Now, that's the important marketing side that you ought to be working on and helping your customer work with, and building out better keywords, looking at the titles of your very best, highest traffic, most repeat listen podcast in order to syndicate, or basically you're going to take the titles and you're going to figure out what concepts are related to those titles from your content library. And then you're going to write new content that are on similar topics that your customer wants, but rather than being informational, they're going to be more related to lead generation. And then once you've got a good set of leads, you're going to look at the titles and you're going to figure out what kind of sales offers you need to make. Now, we can go into that more detail, but just understand the last 7 days on one platform, 809 streams. If I go to my analytics and I see 50 referrals, I now have another ratio to measure. Those measures are more important than the cut and paste that I did to get this thing set up. And see, so if I add my team to it, and I'm not saying it's easy work, but if I add my team to it and they go in and start updating these things, making sure it's correct, making sure the feeds are still loading, going into the Spotify client and following the different channels that they're loading up to make sure that they're shows the latest episode, to make sure whether or not Spotify actually makes links active or whether they don't make links active. Can you see how much of a pain in the butt this can be? So what I do is I add a personal assistant, I add what I call the marketing coordinator, and or a webmaster that goes in and starts making sure this stuff is set up. So I've done this for 10 or 15 different platforms. So for example, Apple Podcast has a separate console that does this. If you're a member of the website, you can go to the dash one of the dashboards that I've got in there, and I link to all these other dashboards that basically allow you to manage this. But just in loading this podcast, I know that my audience is primarily from the UK and Australia. So Ad Briefing's copywriting tips that you're listening to right now, even though I'm not from the UK, I bought the site from a UK copywriter. We're keeping Patrick Quinn's legacy alive, and we should be doing more content about his legacy because his materials are solid, even though he passed away quite a while ago. But again, my target audience for this is Australia, UK, Canada, the United States. But I'm only seeing UK and Australia traffic. So that could be the domain name. So that's something I'd want to test. I already own the other domain, the .com names, but do I want to test backlinks for the .coms that redirect into the UK site, or do I need content on the UK on the site to let people know that we have an internationally English speaking audience? Can you see how valuable this is though, folks? But if you're not setting this stuff up, then you're not getting maximum value. Now, I mentioned YouTube podcasts. YouTube is promoting podcasts like crazy. If you want more organic traffic from a platform, you do what the platform wants you to do. Then you measure. You can use our topic testing methods. You can use the UTM codes from the descriptions linking back to your main website. But it gets real complex real quick. So again, that's why I want to offer this white label service. Now, will I take on clients direct? Yes. If it's a $10 million plus client, I'll take it on direct. And as we talked about in other programs, I often hire a lot of you guys to write the copy because it's kind of why Ad Briefings is here, to train up some really good copywriters that my agency can hire you. You can form an agency and hire me, or you can form an agency and hire each other. But the point being here is there are technical aspects that many of the copywriters have written in over the years. Many of the marketers have written over the years. It's not a creative activity. It's something that's routine and it's check the boxes, and you don't want to do it. And that's okay. That's because I have an IT background. I know how to manage IT staff. I know how to manage creative staff. And I tend to add sometimes 5 or 6 people that'll sit there and just set stuff up. Now, it's expensive to have those people on staff all the time. So again, we look at the agency model. I can bring in temporary contractors. I can train them up. I can get them working, or I can get enough volume of work by white labeling the services. And white labeling means that my company would be a subcontractor to you. You'd have a small spiff. So, if I'm charging $25 an hour, you're charging $30 or $40 an hour. And that additional is covering your overhead. And then my team does the work because they're specialists in doing the work, and you do what you're a specialist at. And this solves the problem of getting dragged into the changes of the platforms or the new platform that comes online and suddenly having to learn new stuff. If you already got stuff you can make money from, you already have skills as a copywriter, you already have skills as a marketer, hone those skills, have somebody else do the rest. The last point I want to make is that the reason we have this content library, this big vault of all the configurations and all the settings we use and all the content we've written and all the social media posts we've written, is because when a new platform comes online, it is a new audience. So for a lot of subscribers who serve conservative, libertarian, and classical liberal publications, users, audiences, you know that when those folks got kicked off of Twitter and Facebook and all those platforms, they went to like Truth Social, Parlor. There's like 15 other platforms they went to. Now that's an audience that's no longer available in the commonly integrated tools. And so now you got to go by hand and start posting on these other platforms. Now, most of these other platforms have schedulers, and if you have all your historic content and you know what content works and you know what content generated leads, you can take all the best content that you've published in the past and just publish it again on the new platform because it's a new audience. So not only did people leave from the platform you're at, people who didn't even know who you were on that platform, they're now on the new platform. And remember, you should be doing this for your clients as well. They're on this new platform with new people, and now you can get out your very best messages. You don't want to go out there and spam them with all the stuff you've written in the past. But again, you know, if you're following what we talk about here, and we're talking about analytics, and all those analytics, the technical elements are properly set up. Your Google Analytics is set up. Your Google Tag Manager is set up. Your Bing Search Console, your Google Search. It's like 100 little pieces. Now, again, in our dashboards, we point to these pieces so you don't have to go looking for them all the time. But ultimately, what happens is now you're back in the creative mode. So a customer says, hey, my Facebook ads are dropping off like crazy. I think my audience is leaving the platform. I think I'm shadow banned. I think whatever. You can just ask them, well, where are they going? Well, they're going out to Macedon. So I gotta start from scratch and build up Macedon. Whoa, hold up, wait a minute. Let's look at what we've done in the past, what's worked in the past, and then what we'll do as an agency, and I'm talking in your words here, what you're going to do as a freelance copywriter, what you're going to do as a marketer, what you're going to do as an agency is you're going to go all the way back to the content library, all the stuff they've done in the past. You're going to look at the controls, you're going to look at what worked, you're going to spin that out into new valuable content for the target audience, but you're also going to recycle that marketing. I got a whole program on recycle your marketing. If you're not recycling what you've written in the past, then you're starting from scratch every time. It doesn't make any sense. It's like you change careers and you start in elementary school rather than building off your past career experience. Folks, the technical elements matter because it feeds the analytics and the data. Knowing that the majority of my traffic is coming from the UK, even though I don't have a UK accent, I don't have a British accent, I don't have an Australian accent, I don't have any accent at all, and I even spell words wrong on the website because I'm not using the Queen's English. Um, that's something I need to look at. So maybe I need to hire a couple writers that are from the UK to make sure my content is relevant to the UK. Now, the UK is a small island. It doesn't have the audience size that we have in the United States. And that's again why we target Canada, United States, Australia, and the UK. But there's probably a copywriter out there who I should be hiring that can do the UK stuff while I'm off doing the US audience. And then ultimately we're serving together. So let me just wrap this up here. I already have people who are doing the technical side of podcast syndication, of video syndication. We don't have time to go into that, but if you're posting just on YouTube, you're missing out on Vimeo, Facebook, native posts on other platforms. And then they also handle the technical stuff on the website. So when the Google Tag Manager is not triggering events for some reason, or I've gotten a couple sales, but I didn't see them in the analytics, they go out and fix that kind of stuff. If you'd like that kind of talent serving your audience and doing it in a way that looks like it comes from your agency, then contact me at www.adbriefings.co.uk to ask your questions about that. I'm Justin Hitt. I hope this has been useful to you. And it's about, I gave you some examples on how to grow your agency quickly without having to add any staff. I gave you examples of technical things that if they aren't working right, you don't get the insights that you need. And finally, how to focus on what you do best and how to profit from other things without having to go learn new stuff. I'll see you in the next podcast. I'm Justin Hitt with Ad Briefings Copywriting Tips.